You got another bill?
Got another bill? My God.
Oh, yeah. Good view.
I did.
It's pretty view.
Oh, yeah.
I can give you congratulations. Yeah.
Oh, you would kill it. You would kill it. Kill it. I made so much money. And, really funny because I sold for 1.2 million. And I sold it basically the first guy had cash.
I do. So that's 100.
Listen, I said, you can one of the guys actually paid me his business. Your business, what was
Yeah, we're going to.
you know, my wife, I'm not minimizing. 5 days a week.
Well, then we're going to get together.
The Senate will please come to order.
I was accused of that.
The Senate will please come to order. While we do have business on the calendar and not even yet on the calendar and pending yet to be on the calendar, before we take any of that up, we're going to do a brief intermission. We will gavel into a recess in order to allow guests onto the floor as the President Pro Tem and I recognize the incredible group of folks that we have. So I will bang us into recess, make a few more comments, and then we will do the ceremony. The Senate will stand in recess till the fall of the gavel. Be a part of this process. And you've done it very well. You've accepted my little nuances about, like, don't move, we're in the middle of a vote. You go right into attention. And you're on it, you're listening and you're on it. And so I hope it's been a great experience for you. I think on behalf of all the senators, we certainly appreciate the ability to get things around the room, because there's no electronics in this room, so it's your best room for note passing in the whole building now. And of course, I want to thank your parents for giving us you and your time and giving you a break from school to be here. And I hope it was a good experience for you. With that, we'll come on down and we'll recognize you. We'll call you up one at a time. You can all fill in a little bit here if you want, and then as we call your individual offspring, you're welcome to come take a picture. Well, come on in if you want. And, oh, I don't know. We'll stand up here somewhere. And
No, you're fine.
that could be the backdrop. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. The first person we have is Ziva Baker. And we have a certificate that you'll get to hold. And we also have a state house flag or state flag pin to add to your pin collection. So,
All right.
got it? All right. We have Eli Welch. And who are we looking at? Who's the primary person? All right.
Eli wins most mischievous smiler.
All right.
I thought the Mrs. Smile was pretty
We have Emmett Stoll. Come on up.
Easy tea then. There you go. Thank you.
All right. We have a future president of the United States with us, Kevin Spack. He's already running.
Yeah, he's got to learn those photo ops.
Thank you, guys.
We have Gracie Hine as reference vice president. We have Phoebe Dawn. Got it? Excellent. And as someone who's named Zuckerman, I'm going to say, last but not least, Adele Dalton. Thank you again. And we appreciate your patience given the last day. For that, I think you're welcome to go wherever you're supposed to go.
Thanks again, guys.
Nice work.
Thanks, guys.
You good?
I was medium sometimes ago, and we were downtown. And you would just see this little cluster.
Are you ready? The Senate will please come to order. We now have up for consideration, where's the Senate Pro Tem? Oh. I believe we are passing over 494, in which case I'd like to recognize Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're hoping to move to S14 first, followed by S133, and then S100.
So I believe the senator is moving to suspend the rules in order to take up off of the notice calendar and pending entry on the notice calendar, S14, S100, and S133.
Precisely. Thank you.
That's what I thought I heard. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to take up for immediate consideration S14, S100, and S133, which appear on your notice calendar, as well as pending entry on the notice calendar. With that, I believe the first bill on that would be S14. S14 was passed by the Senate. It has been Committee of Conference was ordered. And the pending question is, shall the Senate accept and adopt the report of the Committee of Conference? For report of the committee, the Senator from Windham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Committee on Judiciary voted out S14, what feels like a lifetime ago, earlier in the session. S14 amended Title 28, VSA 125, to provide additional data for numerous components of the criminal justice system to the committees of jurisdiction in both the Senate and the other body. The responsibility of conveying and analyzing the information fell mainly on the shoulders of the Justice Oversight Committee and the Office of Racial Equity. The reports would provide data on topics related to recidivism, clearance rates, assistance, community supervision, condition violations, and a number of other important criminal justice-related data topics. The original bill was supported unanimously by the Senate Judiciary Committee. The other Chambers Committee proposed a strike all that added a new working group called the Coordinated Justice Reform Advisory Panel. Upon receiving this strike all in our committee, we heard significant concern that the Office of Racial Equity was not included as a member, nor was the Racial Disparities Advisory Panel, also known as RDAP. Our conference committee came to an agreement in which we included the Office of Racial Equity and RDAP, and also provided that the two legislators serving on this advisory committee come from the Justice Oversight Committee so that there's some overlap between the two groups. The stakeholders involved stated they were appreciative of the changes and support the Committee of Conference's amended version. I would ask the Senate to concur with these changes and support the Committee of Conference bill.
Thank you, Senator. You've heard the report of the Committee on Conference. It's an up or down vote. The question is, shall the Senate approve the report of the Committee on Conference? Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I've been looking for an appropriate time to make the following statement. When this session started, your Senate Judiciary Committee had lost 3 long-term members. And frankly, I was very concerned about the Senate Judiciary Committee and what would happen. The 3 members of the Senate Conference Committee from the Judiciary Committee have done nothing but terrific work the entire session. And I want to thank those new members for their hard work. And I think it's proven by the fact that the 3 of them could negotiate with the House and come out with what I think is an excellent product. So my thanks to all the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, particularly the old timers like you and I.
I will just second everything that was just said. With that said, our question is, shall the report of the Committee on Conference be adopted? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. And you have adopted the report of the Committee of Conference on S14. We have S133, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to education law. And so we have a House proposal of amendment, and for that report, I would call on the Chair of the Committee of Education, Senator from Bennington, Senator Campion.
Thank you, Mr. President. We just heard that the Senate, that the House passed this out, so we are going to actually ask that we pass over this.
Fair enough. I do not see the Senator. Oh, we do have the Chair of Economic Development, and I believe that we will do S100. So we have before us S100, which comes back with House proposal of amendment. For that report, I would look to the Chair of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before I begin my report, I want to thank you all as my colleagues, friends, and legislative family for making it possible for me to be here while also being present for the first month of my daughter's life. If you can imagine, today was her original due date. My first lesson as a parent was that trying to plan is futile, but that would have been a hard reality to cope with as a legislator without your support and understanding, particularly my afternoon chair, the Senator from Washington. There are many people I want to lift up in gratitude, but I must especially thank my vice chair, the Senator from Windsor. As graciously as she stepped in to help steer this bill and the work of the committee in my absence, she has yielded this final report to me so that together we can finish what we started, and I'm incredibly grateful. With that, Mr. President, it is my privilege to report the changes that I would dare to describe as subtle and complementary, so I'll probably do as broad of a brush as I can here, made to S100 by the other body, and ask that the Senate concur so this landmark housing and homeownership bill can make it one step closer to being signed into law. There are large chunks of this bill that fall under different categories, and the first probably major section of changes is in municipal zoning, 24 VSA. Section 1 was where we placed reduced parking requirements for developments and units, and the House took our work requiring only one parking space per dwelling unit, though a developer can depart above that, and made it more specific to residential districts served by water and sewer. And a town can ask for more than one space, up to 1.5 spaces, for multi-unit dwellings in areas without water and sewer where there might be less access to transportation. Section 2 is a really critical section as it left our body and came back, where we allow duplexing by right and quadruplexing where we have municipal water and sewer by right. And what the other body did in this context is simply add more permissive language for both the town and the developer. We have up to 4 units in areas served by town sewer and water, but the town may ask for more than that. And a developer may add an additional floor, but they also may not. So they just created more permissive language. Section 3 is similar to what we had and really addresses the heart of some of our concerns around the homelessness crisis in the state, that homeless shelters can't effectively be zoned out of existence or the ability to operate as they need to. The other body generally left that provision alone, but they did move up the effective date from December 2024 to September of 2023. So we will see that provision take place a lot sooner, and municipalities can have some interim bylaws in the meantime. Section 4 is definitions, and this moves the definition of served by municipal water and sewer infrastructure. The next sections are changes to bylaws, zoning districts, the state database. There have been some concerns that requiring each town to upload their own bylaws and zoning districts to a new zoning atlas would be a burden, but the Department of Housing and Community Development has assured us that they are giving extra money to the regional planning commissions to carry that burden on behalf of the towns much more fully. Section 6 was one that had, garnered some conversation back and forth in many of our committees and contexts, and that is a provision that gives any 10 voters, residents, or property owners in the town an ability to appeal a zoning decision. But it does prohibit the ability to appeal based on the character of the area or for affordable housing development once a decision has been made by a municipality. The key addition here is the word resident, which was a request from our Office of Racial Equity so that people who aren't yet citizens or property owners could still maintain an appeal as well. Section 7 and 8 just add the word minor to subdivisions, very minor change. Sections 9, 10, and 11 have not changed. Section 12 is largely the same as well. Those are a lot of cleanup areas so that there can't be sort of backdoor ways that towns or individuals can get out of these really sweeping changes around duplexing and quadruplexing by right. Section 13 is a newer section from the House that strikes the ability of rural towns to require changes to bylaws be adopted by Australian ballot in perpetuity. So they have to, they can still choose to use Australian ballot and elect that path, but they need to do it on a case-by-case basis. It can't be ad infinitum. Section 14 is also somewhat new in this allows the Department of Housing and Community Development to use 20% of municipal planning funds to provide assistance to towns to meet the requirements of creating a neighborhood development area designation. I think the really good news, and I confirm this with the commissioner, is that with the changes that communities see coming, many of them want that neighborhood development area designation now, and they want to be able to move quickly to help communities get that, which is already, I think, a success of a bill that has not been signed into law yet. Section 15 was a House floor amendment that includes a regional planning report, and is something we've seen in various bills that haven't made it across the finish line, but it looks at the effectiveness of coordination between municipal, regional, and state planning, given that we don't have a lot of regional to state planning infrastructure. Section 15A has been in and out of the bill, and that's housing resource navigators through VAPTA, the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, and they are still directed to hire housing resource navigators, which we passed here. That is all contingent on an appropriation for that in the FY24 budget, we have not passed yet. The next chunk of sections relate to Act 250. As folks may remember, we talked about raising the Act 250 jurisdictional threshold to fall under permit requirement for Act 250 for housing units from 10 units to 25 units. We did that only in some of our designated areas, downtowns and neighborhood development areas. And the other body added language that includes new town centers, village centers with zoning and subdivision bylaws. And in that context, we had a big discussion. I imagine folks remember about going from 10 to 25 in some of those smaller village centers and smaller communities, areas, rural areas without zoning and subdivision bylaws or without significant infrastructure or that designation. And one of the things that I said at the time was that I just couldn't guarantee that if we made a huge change, it wouldn't create a whole new housing development in the middle of a greenfield. And I don't know if this is overstepping, but I would really applaud the change that the other body made, which allows 4 new units to be added to an existing structure and only count as 1 unit toward that total number of units. So that might sound a little convoluted, but what it does is actually really focus this provision on infill development and places where a developer might want to go back and add to a project that they've already done. The exemption and the need to get a jurisdictional opinion to fall within time for the sunset is now June 30th, 2026. I believe we had said January 1st, 2026, but I will look to my counterpart from Senate Natural Resources if I'm incorrect about that. Section 17 on master plan permits is still intact. Section 18, so this is all in 10 VSA, clarifies that Act 250 fees apply per application, and the cap on fees applies per application, not per project. Section 18A is a Act 250 municipal delegation report, and VAPTA, in consultation with the Natural Resources Board and other stakeholders, shall propose a framework needed to create a municipal delegation process for Act 250 permits, with a report due December 31st of 2023. So this is now timely enough that one of the first things we can take up and consider next session is how to allow municipalities to administer Act 250 criteria, but not create a duplicative permitting process between municipal and Act 250 permitting. Section 19, there's a new element to the report to the Natural Resources Board that was already coming back, and it requires a review of the housing jurisdictional trigger and whether it should be changed. So again, this is coming back to some of the bigger questions we asked and not being ready to make a decision this year. Section 19A is the designated area report. It extends the deadline for the designated area report already required in Act 182 from July 15th of 2023 to December 31st of 2023. So, we were going to get this report back in the middle of this summer, but instead they'll have another 6 months since this has become a huge area of discussion for us, and we will be able to see a little bit of experimentation in these areas and get better information for next session. Sections 19B, C, and D exempt electric distribution utilities. Sorry, this is going to be much more my counterpart in natural resources area than mine. But it exempts electric distribution utilities from Act 250 for replacing or moving existing distribution lines. I will certainly yield to the chair of our counterpart committee on this, but that did come up as what some considered a common sense provision. And this exemption still sunsets on January 1st, 2026, so we can make sure that we agree with that. It requires any utility that uses the exemption to report back to the relevant committees on the projects completed pursuant to the exemption. There's one section on covenants in 27 VSA, and this just harmonizes it with the 1.5 spaces change in that first section that I reported. No one touched road disclosure, section 21. People have really fully agreed that we should require sellers to disclose if a property is located on a class 4 highway or legal trail. That has never been disputed. Sections 22 and 23 are intact. It's the Building Energy Code Study Committee that we passed. Section 24 is new, and it is a Rural Recovery Coordination Council. We started this session, and now we're ending this section talking about this session, I should say, making sure we're talking about the needs of our rural communities and how to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the entire state. And so this coordination council is created to study and make recommendations on how to strengthen coordination between agencies and stakeholders involved in rural community development, with a report due December of 2023. And this again is has an appropriation that's contingent upon the passage of the FY24 budget. The next section is in wastewater and wastewater connection permits, another area that we had a big discussion on. And this directs ANR to identify any state permitting requirements or ANR processes that may be duplicated under state and local permits and propose how to eliminate such redundancies. That report is due January 31st of 2025, since it is a big ask that we're making. And this is just one area where we ran out of time to make sure we were doing a good job in figuring out what's duplicative and what truly is required by both. Section 25A is a House floor amendment, so I'll be able to speak to it. I think my counterpart in natural resources could probably do a better job, but it also is relatively new to this bill. And it directs the Public Utility Commission to revise its rules concerning utility service disconnection at rental properties and require a utility to provide notice of the disconnection to the property owner or landlord, even if the tenant is the ratepayer, and more generally, to allow for remote disconnection. In addition, the Public Utility Commission shall submit draft legislation to the General Assembly proposing similar disconnection requirements for utilities that are not subject to the PUC's jurisdiction. That might be municipal and private water and wastewater companies. There's a lot in there. I and others might do their best to speak to how this change ended up here and what it means. We did have a lot of discussion both in our committee and I know in Senate Finance, and perhaps other committees took this up as well. So a lot of concerns were raised that I think it'll be clear that our intent is to watch this provision closely. Section 26 remains the same on ADU jurisdiction. Section 27 largely remains the same. It deletes the fair housing position per our practice with the budget, but that position, a fair housing litigator within the Human Rights Commission, exists in the budget should we pass it. There is still an increase in the penalty for violating the Fair Housing Act, and there still remains intact a Division of Fire Safety study about building codes and fire safety codes. The final, I think before the effective dates, the final chunk of the bill is a lot of the appropriations we made to housing programs that we believe are working. Much of this was discussed in Senate appropriations, so I'll certainly leave the detail on that discussion to the Committee of Jurisdiction. But we'll quickly go over it here, and much of it represents a lot of agreement between a lot of stakeholders, including some of the governor's recommends. So Section 30 is replaced with Section 45, so I'll talk about that later, and its implementation is contingent on FY24 funding. Section 31 is intent language to make an appropriation in FY24 to expand home sharing opportunities by $200,000. And unless I'm mistaken, that made it in the base budgeting. It's a small appropriation, but it's incredibly meaningful for what we know to be, I believe, just 2 home sharing programs in the state that operate regionally. These are programs that have operated on a shoestring and have not really been part of our housing conversations, but provide such an incredible service when someone's looking to age in place in their home. They might have a disability and they need some help, and someone else is looking for affordable housing. It's kind of the Vermont version of Airbnb, just done our way, and so hopefully we can actually expand these opportunities for folks. Section 32 has intent language to make an appropriation in FY24 for financial support for mobile home repair, improvement, park infrastructure, et cetera. I have a budget information here, and I don't want to speak to that one. I'm not sure if it made it in the FY24 budget, but there is also now a study on mobile homes, and it's likely that we'll look at that study and then figure out what the right amount of funding is to make sure our mobile homes don't fall and our parks don't fall into disrepair. Section 33, it maintains the definition of a first-generation home buyer, which does still have an appropriation contingent in the FY24 budget. And that's Section 34 as well is the contingent appropriation. Sections 35 through 37 are the missing middle income home ownership pilot program. That was funded partially in the it was funded the full backlog in the budget adjustment. So we might continue to look at how that worked because it's an expensive program, but homeownership is certainly a goal of ours. But I do not believe there's an additional appropriation there. I could be wrong. And I don't see David Hall, but sections 38 and 39 are funded. It's the rental housing revolving loan program. Again, emphasis on revolving loan because this means that we should be getting the money back and be able to put it into more affordable rental units. They're very specifically outlined so that for every dollar a developer gets who wants to do workforce rental housing, there's an equivalent amount that they must take off the rent and for a certain number of years, as well as make sure that they are serving people within certain income brackets depending on how much money they take in for each unit. And that is an appropriation that exists in the budget should we pass it. Sections 40 and 41 are the VHIP program, Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program. There is the intent to make an additional appropriation in FY24. It is one of our most affordable, effective ways to create more units of housing is how we felt in our committee. Section 42 is an intent to create additional appropriation for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Section 43 creates a rental housing stabilization service program administered by CVOEO. We had the beginnings of this in our bill as we passed it. We put $2.5 million towards a pilot program generally administered by Vermont Legal Aid to help tenants who are in arrears get a month's worth of rent paid, but also put them into a kind of mediation and support program so that they are not evicted and they also are working more with their landlord on what the relationship should look like moving forward. So the other body liked that and added to it, and you should see that reflected in the budget as well with a one-time fund and then a base appropriation for that program. Same with Section 45. Section 46 is new language on lead inspectors. And again, this is, we've been trying to make sure we fully understand what all is here, but I think some of you have heard about this from constituents, and this ensures that if you're the owner of a rental housing subject to these lead laws and you personally perform the work under this chapter, you're exempt from subsection A, which is a new liability, as I understand it, that was created for lead inspection. Finally, we have the effective dates, and the act takes effect on July 1st, 2023, except some of the subsections and studies and different pieces for municipal, et cetera, take place in 2024, or now the shelter piece newly takes effect September 1st, 2023, and the lead inspection piece takes effect on passage. Mr. President, with that, the work of so many committees to wrestle with the dual nature of our housing and climate crises is before you. A great deal of seeking compromise and common ground that represents the best of what we do in Vermont, and has us counted among the states trying to revitalize our communities and close homeownership gaps equitably, joined by many of our neighbors in the north, including the state of Washington, which passed into law duplexing and quadruplexing by right just yesterday. We will look back on this moment as one of compassionate and smart growth, and we will be on the right side of history. Your Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs voted unanimously to concur and advance S100 to the governor. And with that, Mr. President, this bill has had a long journey through the legislature, and now it's time to bring it home. We ask for your support for a bill that was named as such because making housing opportunities for everyone allows each Vermonter to find their own version of what home means to them. To conclude, Mr. President, I would like to offer a few verses of the 1915 poem, No Vermonters in Heaven, by Dr. Ernest Johnstone, who I think would recognize the yearning to both make a home here and make that home possible for more people, and to preserve the beauty of this place we proudly call home, if I may.
You may.
The angel replied, all Vermonters come here when they first depart from the earth, but after a day or a month or a year, they become restless and lonesome and homesick appear and sigh for the land of their birth. They tell of its many and beautiful hills where forests majestic appear, its rivers and lakes and its streams and its hills, where nature the purest of water distills, and they soon get dissatisfied here. They tell of ravines wild, secluded, and deep, of clover-decked landscapes serene, of towering mountains imposing and steep, adown which the torrents exulting leap through forests perennially green. We give them the best that the kingdom provides. They have everything here that they want. But not a Vermonter in heaven abides. A very short time period here he resides. Then he hikes his way back to Vermont. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Chittenden Southeast. The question at this point is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on S100? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill reminds me a little bit of a wheelbarrow, heavily laden with lots of provisions, and you wouldn't ordinarily want two people to try to push the same wheelbarrow. But in fact, the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee has worked very closely with Economic Housing and General Affairs, and we've managed to push it all the way home, I think, and not spill along the way. I think the Senator from Chittenden South has walked through the provisions well, and rather than offer any kind of duplicative remarks, I'll just say that we have adhered to the belief that good planning is good planning. It can happen at the municipal level, the regional level, the state level, and what this bill does is help support housing and improve our ability to plan well at whatever level seems appropriate. With that, I just report that Senate Natural recommends concurrence on the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Question again is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on S100? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have concurred with the House proposal of amendment on S100. Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to return to S133 to make a motion to recommit the bill to Senate Education, please.
Senator from Bennington has moved that S133, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to election laws, be recommitted.
Education.
Education laws. My mistake. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. And you have recommitted S133, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to education law, to the Committee on Education. With that said, Senator from Windsor, I'm wondering if it is your intention to suspend the rules to take up pending entry on the notice calendar H517.
It is my intention indeed, sir. You've read my mind.
I thought I might. With that said, please.
So pending entry on the calendar for notice, I move the rules be suspended and H517, an act relating to the
Approval of the
Duxbury
dissolution
of the Duxbury
Moortown
Water District. Okay. An act relating to the approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1 be taken up for immediate consideration.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Windsor has moved that H517, pending entry on the notice calendar, be taken up for immediate action. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. And you have suspended your rules in order to take up H517 for immediate action. Please listen to second reading of the bill.
H517, an act relating to approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1.
With that said, I would look to the senator from Washington for a report from the Committee on Government Operations.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill has two parts, and I'll be speaking just to the first part, which is about the dissolution of this fire district. I normally don't think of charter amendments as urgent, but I believe this one qualifies. In short, the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1 would like to be dissolved, but the way they went about it, this dissolution, was not proper, winding down all of the assets, liabilities, properties, and claims that the fire district might have. Because their dissolution was not proper, the check that they wrote to the Waterbury Water Utility District, known as the Edward Farrar Utility District, cannot be cashed by the utility, stranding $81,000. More importantly, though, the utility does not have the legal authority now to go fix any water main breaks should they occur in the Duxbury Moortown Fire Number 1 area, which serves 140 homes. And for all practical purposes, the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1 no longer exists. So those 140 homes would be out of luck if they have a water main break. Additionally, the utility district, which has been providing billing for this, for the fire district, cannot collect delinquent payments, which may have been accruing since the vote was taken last August. But thankfully, this charter amendment solves all of those issues, properly dissolving the fire district, transferring all of the assets, liabilities, property, and claims of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1 to the Edward Farrar Utility District. So, like I said, it solves all of those problems. And for this part, we heard from Representative Tom Stevens. We heard from the municipal manager in the town of Waterbury, and Tucker Anderson, our legislative counsel. And at this point, I would yield to the senator from Addison to continue.
Thank you. The senator from Washington defers to the senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. On its way out, the Duxbury Moortown Fire District is assisting us in putting out a fire. So we are adding an amendment to this that would permit, and I believe you all should have it at your desks, it would permit the Executive Committee of the Department of States Attorneys and Sheriffs to authorize or direct the department's executive director to appoint deputy state's attorneys who shall have all the same powers and duties of any other deputy state's attorney, except that such deputies may prosecute cases in any county of the state. The executive committee shall have the authority to limit the term and scope of any such appointments and may remove such deputies at the committee's pleasure. This is an amendment that would give the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs the flexibility to have deputy state's attorneys, which they already do have deputy state's attorneys. And just to be clear, there are multiple deputy state's attorneys, not only in this office of the state's attorneys and sheriffs, but also in each county's state's attorneys' offices. This would give them the flexibility of appointing such state's attorneys that would have statewide jurisdiction, that would be able to handle cases in any of our counties should the need to do so arise under unusual circumstances. This was a situation that needed our direct attention, and so the Government Operations Committee was happy to abide and help this situation move along, or this flexibility move along. And in doing so, we heard from two members of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs who assisted us with this language, and of course our Chief Counsel, Jennifer Carby. We voted on the entire charter as amended on a vote of 6-0-0, and we asked the body to support this charter as amended. Thank you, Mr. President. Oops, excuse me.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Bennington.
President, I want to rise in full support of this amendment. It is really, as you look at it, nothing more than what the Defender General has at his ability to appoint prosecutors in any county where there's a backlog or whatever. But clearly, we have an unusual situation where the state's attorney has had allegations made against him by some of the people who he directly supervises. And this would allow the Office of the Executive Director and the Executive Committee of the State Attorneys and Sheriff's Association to take some action. Whether it solves the problem or not, I don't know, but it's a very difficult problem. And on our last day, I want to express my appreciation to the chair of the Government Operations Committee and the full Government Operations Committee for taking a look at this and for passing it out. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H517. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the time-sensitive nature of this, I would ask that we move H517 through all remaining stages of passage.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to place H517 through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to place H517 through all remaining stages of passage. Third reading of 517 was ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H517, an act relating to approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury-Moretown Fire District Number 1.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H517. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move at this time that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message our actions just taken in this session on S14, an act relating to a report on criminal justice-related investments and trends, S100, an act relating to housing opportunities made for everyone, home. H517, an act relating to approval of the dissolution of Duxbury-Moretown Fire District Number 1.
Now the Senator has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions to the House forthwith, S14, S100, and H517. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules to message your actions taken on S14, S100, and H517 to the House forthwith. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that concludes the business that we can finish right now. I would ask that the Senate stand in adjournment until 3 p.m. And we will hopefully at that time have other messages from the other body that we can act on.
Senator, now, pending announcements.
Let me withdraw that motion and offer the floor to my colleague from Addison.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Senator from Chittenden Central. I move that we suspend the rules and pending entry on the notice calendar that we take up for immediate action the appointments beginning on page 3324 of today's calendar and running through all of those on page 3325. So starting with Eric Peterson of South Burlington and ending with Kirsten Bourgeois of Swanton, with the exception of the one that is underlined, Matthew Bersmenstein, but taking up all the rest as a group and without debate and passing them with approval as a group. Hopefully I said that correctly. Thank you.
You probably did, but I was also trying to converse, so I will double check.
Okay.
And I'm sure you did just fine.
Okay, great, awesome. Thank you.
Give me half a second. Okay. The senator from Addison has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up both the ripe confirmations that you can find on page 3324 in today's calendar, as well as the not quite ripe, but they're on notice, which is the dated confirmations after today's date, and those that are pending entry on the notice calendar, which are being handed out currently to some of the committees. At this point, it would be all of those combined, except for Mr. Matthew Bernstein of Winooski, midway down the page on 3324, because that would be the more formal confirmation process, for lack of a better term. And I'm sure the secretary will write that all down the way it was supposed to be said. But I hope you all know what I'm saying. Are you ready for that vote, which is a rule suspension to take them up? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, you suspended your rules in order to take up for immediate consideration all of the non-underlined confirmations on 3324, 3325, and on pending entry. Now the question is, shall the Senate confirm that full list of individuals? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have confirmed all of those individuals. We now have one confirmation to be taken up, which is the confirmation of Matthew Bernstein of Winooski, Vermont, as the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate of the Office of Child, Youth, and Family Advocate. And for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you may recall, the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate was a position that was put into place in legislation last session. And then over the summer and fall, the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate Oversight Committee conducted a very thorough search, interviewed many folks for the position to oversee specific concerns and complaints within the state of Vermont regarding children, youth, and families. The committee sent a list of names to the governor, and the governor then has returned the name of Matthew Bernstein to be confirmed as the state's first child, youth, and family advocate. Matthew is a social worker by trade and worked in the state as a social worker, worked with the legal aid program, and currently holds a law degree where he has worked both in-state and out-of-state as a lawyer, and worked very, most significantly with children and families. He's very familiar with the judicial system, with the Department of Children and Families, and with the various organizations that are concerned about children and family welfare. The Committee on Health and Welfare voted 5-0 to send his name to the full Senate for confirmation as the first child and youth family advocate for the state of Vermont. Thank you, Mr. President.
I've heard the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare. The question is, shall the Senate confirm the appointment of Matthew Bernstein of Winooski, Vermont as the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate in the Office of the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate for a term from and including February 27, 2023 to and including February 28, 2027, and until a successor is appointed as qualified. Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Senator from Rutland, are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock. Yes. Senator Campion. Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Hewlett.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Engel.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald. Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershman.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Wolfson.
Aye.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
Yes.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 30. Those voting nay, 0. And you have confirmed the appointment of Matthew Bernstein as the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate. Are there any other announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask the Finance Committee to meet in our committee room one last time. We have finally heard from our last appointment.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending any announcements, I would move at this point that the Senate stand in adjournment until 3:30 p.m. I think if we come back at 3, we might wind up gaveling in and gaveling out. So let's say 3:30, and I will be conferring with House leadership to make sure that we are together on when we're ending, and as soon as I have those confirmations, I'll let the body know. Thank you.
Are there, Senator from Madison.
I would ask that Senate Natural Resources and Energy meet at 2:30 for a brief meeting. We may be seeing a bill come over.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand adjournment or recess. Is it adjournment or recess? Recess until 3:30. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you'll stand in recess till 3:30.